So, welcome everyone. This is Cate's Hour of Miracles and blessings to everyone. This is going out live on awakening-together.org and also through Pal Talk. If you want to listen in live each week, you can download the app called Pal Talk and go onto Awakening Together. And as you listen in, you can type some questions or comments live if you like. Or otherwise, this talk is put out onto my YouTube, which is under Kate Greaves. And I think Awakening Together now have all their speakers under their on YouTube as well. So I noticed that I'm in my videos are now in two different places on YouTube. So that's lovely to see. So I'm here to be truly helpful, to allow the Holy Spirit to speak through me and bless you, and to love you and to tell you how innocent and how gorgeous, how magnificent and how lovely, and tell you you are the light of the world. So I just want to bless you and say I love you, I bless you, and I honour you. And I usually do that at the end, but I thought I might start doing it at the start because this is an hour-long talk and maybe people can't always get to the end and hear a blessing. So I thought I'll do it at both ends. So today I'm going to continue on with a topic that I started a few weeks ago, which is pure non-duality. What is pure non-duality? And I'm going to be reading again from Gary Renard's book, The Disappearance of the Universe. But before I start, I wanted to just first of all invite the Holy Spirit in, which I'm always doing. I'm conscious of the Holy Spirit, which is my right mind. I don't have to, it can seem like it's outside us, the Holy Spirit, but it's actually our mind. We have it, and it sounds like our voice. And it can take some time on your journey when you're used to listening to the ego voice, some time to actually get in touch with the Holy Spirit. But there's many beautiful ways to do that. And many helpful tools, but the most important thing is that you have to do it. You have to sit quietly and desire to hear the thoughts of God, the Holy Spirit's voice. So this journey is all about you and your mind and getting quiet. So teachers can point and share the wisdom. And really teachers are only, awakened minds are really just saying that you can have this, you can practice the course, you can do everything that Jesus instructs us to do in the course, or on whatever spiritual path you're on, and that really teachers are just saying this is possible to awaken. I'm not special. Most awakened minds are, their bodies look quite average. There's nothing special about them. But you'll just notice one thing about our minds that have awakened is that they've been non-compromising. And with that, with just the one desire to have the peace of God, they have been able to awaken to this love and lose the fear in the mind and the judgment and the jealousy and the blame and whatever else, the guilt. All those things can drop away and remain away. They can completely disappear from your mind. And what an awakened mind represents here is certainty. So that's what my mind represents now is certainty. So people say they like to come to see me because I'm very certain that when you practice this, when you whatever your process is, whether you apply the daily lesson to any egoic thoughts, however you do it, it's a certainty that it works. And there's certainty that you can be free of your fear mind. So it's really representative. An awakened mind can point you, but really you're the one that has to do the mind watching. Your mind is the one that will get the upsets, and this is where you need to apply the teachings, and you're going to possibly come across things that your ego or the ego will not want to forgive or not want to go beyond. And that's okay. It's just a constant willingness to apply the teachings, but you have to go beyond everything. Everything in this world, the first principle, the miracle principle, is there's no hierarchy of illusions, and that seems like just a quick little line that we read and we gloss over and we go past very quickly, but it's really one of the most important aspects of the Course is that we see, our ego mind thinks that there's a huge hierarchy that being sexually abused by a pedophile is harder to forgive than somebody writing us a nasty letter. They're not. They're all the same thing. They all come down to the same belief that I can be hurt by another body. And the answer is always the same, is I'm not a body. I am spirit. I am free. So one problem, one solution. How you get there is your journey. And it's very, very kind and gentle. And so we don't have to rush. There's no rushing. But if you want to be free of your suffering mind, this is the way. This is Jesus' clear way through the Course in Miracles. So I'm just going to read from lesson 333 to start with. Forgiveness ends the dream of conflict here. Conflict must be resolved. It cannot be evaded, set aside, denied, disguised, seen somewhere else, called by another name, or hidden by deceit of any kind, if it would be escaped. It must be seen exactly as it is, where it is thought to be, in the reality which has been given it, and with the purpose that the mind accorded it. For only then are its defences lifted, and the truth can shine upon it as it disappears. So I just want to sort of give a little bit more detail on that. Jesus is really asking us in this lesson and all through the Course that conflict must be resolved. So when we have conflict in our life, we try to evade it, we try to set it aside, we try to deny it, we try to disguise it, we try to look for it in another place, so we project it out that someone else is wrong, call it by another name, or just say, oh no, that's okay, when I'm not really upset by that, or hidden by deceit of any kind. We will not escape the conflict. Conflict is of the ego, and we need to he says it must be seen exactly as it is. So part of our mind training course is in the past we've tried to evade and deny and set aside and disguise things because we don't want to look upon our grievances, the conflict in our mind. We want to constantly project it out and say, if that person or this situation were differently, I would be happy, I would be at peace. If they would change, if they were different to me in some way, or if this hadn't have happened, I would be fine, I'd be happy. But Jesus is really telling us that we need to see it exactly as it is. So where it is thought to be. So what he's pointing at is the conflict is in our mind, in the reality which has been given it. So I've given it reality in my mind, and with the purpose that the mind accorded it. The purpose that the mind accorded it was to keep me completely asleep in a dream of separation. That's the ego's purpose. It does not want to awaken. It's a death wish. It's a murderous hatred death wish. And our way out is to look at the problem as it is, as he says here. It must be seen exactly as it is. We have to just look at it. We're not going to be overwhelmed by it, because we're seeing that this is not who I am, and this is not who they are. In fact, there's no other, there's only one. So I'm one with all my brothers. So I'll just read the little prayer at the bottom of this lesson. Father, forgiveness is the light you chose to shine away all conflict and all doubt, and light the way for our return to you. Excuse me. No light but this can end our evil dreams. No light but this can save the world, for this alone will never fail in anything, being your gift to your beloved Son. So forgiveness is, once again, just looking and not reacting, not judging, not being upset, just having your mind corrected very gently by the Holy Spirit. It waits and judges not. So very, very quietly, when we're in any sort of upset, we just forgive. One of the things that I felt guided to mention today was, if you are in any conflict, or if you find you get triggered by anything, I think I've shared many, many times that my basic forgiveness process was, whatever I was upset about, I would look at it, I would see it for what it is, and I would put it on the altar to the Holy Spirit. So in my mind I would create like an altar, like something that, and I would just gather all my thoughts or my guilt, every single thing that I was upset about, and I would gather it in a big bundle, and I would put it on the altar, the Holy Spirit, and I would say, you take this, I don't want it anymore, because I was sick and tired of suffering. I was literally absolutely, I had chronic fatigue, so I was absolutely worn out by my thoughts and judgments. He was wearing me out. I was chronically fatigued by the mind. So I would literally just, Holy Spirit, you have this. I don't want it. You have it. I've got no need of it. And then my next prayer is, help me see this differently. Above all else, I want to see it differently. So sometimes if you're finding you're still upset, you can just repeat the words, help me see this differently. Help me see this differently. Because what you'll do then is you'll block out any other thought in your mind to come in, because you can only hold one thought in your mind at the one time. So I've used the repeating of something as a very useful tool on my journey. Sometimes I've repeated the same thing for an hour, sometimes repeated in blocks over a day, but it's always something that it says in a course the Holy Spirit will give you a word or a phrase, but I found that a very, very useful mantra to just repeat, because while you're saying that, you can't think the thoughts that are upsetting you. So that's a useful tool that the Spirit guided me last night to share today. So I trust the Holy Spirit to be in charge of this recording. So I'm going to, this pure non-duality I shared a few weeks ago. I had I felt to do a talk on pure non-duality, and I didn't get through the reading, and I really felt prompted to go back to it and try to finish it today. But what I want to do is first read something that was extremely helpful to me on my journey, and it's, as I said, it's from Gary Renard's book, The Disappearance of the Universe, and it's on page 37 if you've got the book. And this is something that Pursah says to Gary: you should keep in mind that each of the 4 major attitudes of learning are long roads in themselves. Now, he's just gone through 4 ways. We've got duality, I've just got to try and remember. Okay, duality, which is the state of mind that most minds here are at. Semi-non-duality, non-duality, and pure non-duality. And if you're interested, go and read those. It's in in the chapter called The J Underground. I've read this section many, many times. It's very important to try to get an understanding, and from this particular chapter I had a revelation experience. I was asked the Holy Spirit to show me what pure non-duality was and to understand it. I thought I was going to get some sort of intellectual understanding of it, but I ended up having a complete revelation with oneness with God. It was just absolutely beautiful. And now I live in that state of mind. So you remember at the time being totally amazed by it, but now it's the most natural state of being you can live in. I mean, it's probably not as exactly intense because we're living in a world, but there's a deep, deep centre of peace that we can live out of. So you should keep in mind that each of the 4 major attitudes of learning are long roads in themselves. So we have to understand that as we move from duality to semi-non-duality, as Artern and Pursah describe it, they're long roads in themselves, so they can take many, many years. So when I look back, I was probably moving into semi-non-duality sort of 20 or 30 years ago, once I started to see it, because there's a way of starting to think about God. And as your mind shifts into that, which you don't have to come to from just reading the course or technically being on a spiritual path, you might have already had that. Even as a young child, you might have had some inclination that God is love, and that the doors opened in your mind to that maybe God is just this beautiful love, and that He's sort of omnipotent and omnipotent and whatever all the other beautiful words are, just these really, just this idea that there's something beyond this world that is not part of, that has nothing to do with any death or dying or sickness. So our minds open up to that. And we can be on that path then for many, many years, still seemingly in the egoic mind. But And he says here, and you will sometimes bounce around like a ping pong ball in between them. That was a really good, I really love that they point to that, because there can be this idea as we're going along on our journey that as soon as we get some clarity of mind, or we have a period of maybe months or years of really beautiful bliss and peace, that we're suddenly shifted away from that. So it's really important when our mind is somehow unexpectedly shifts back to fear, that we can be really comfortable that we can move back into the peace just by, and I'll just read on what he says here and the reason why that happens. The Holy Spirit will correct you along the way and set you back in the right direction. Do not feel bad when you temporarily lose your way. There is no one who has ever walked this earth, including Jesus, who did not give way, who did not give in to temptation in some way. The myth of living a perfect life in terms of behaviour is self-defeating and unnecessary. All that is necessary is to be willing to receive correction. So that's it in a nutshell. So when you feel yourself being pulled back and bouncing around like a ping pong ball, don't feel bad then when you temporarily lose your way. So even Jesus, it's lovely to know, wow, even Jesus, he had his moments where his mind ping-ponged around until it was completely maintained in this love. It's really beautiful and important to remember that and not be hard on ourselves when we do move out of this love. So I'm going to start reading on page 39 now. Pure non-dualism recognises the authority of God so completely that it relinquishes all psychological attachment to anything that is not God. So what that means is, as we go along and we're practicing this, we relinquish psychological attachment to anything that is not God. So psychological attachment is our egoic need for, say, we've got a attachment to money or finances, bodies, partners, children, everything in your life, any type of thing in your life that you're psychologically attached to. And that could just be that a simple thing that your child sends you a Mother's Day blessing on Mother's Day. If you're psychologically attached to that, you'll suffer. So we have to relinquish everything because we have everything in God. This attitude also recognises what some people have called the like from like principle, which says that anything coming from God must be like him. Pure non-dualism is not willing to compromise on this principle either. Rather, it says that anything that comes from God must be exactly like him. God could not create anything that is not perfect, or else he wouldn't be perfect. The logic of that is flawless. If God is perfect and eternal, then by definition, anything he creates would also have to be perfect and eternal. That certainly narrows it down, says Gary. Artern says, since there is obviously nothing in this world that is perfect and eternal, Jesus was able to see the world for what it was, nothing. But he also knew that it appeared for a reason, and that it was a trick to keep people away from the truth of God and his kingdom. Gary says, why does it have to keep us away from the truth? And Artern says that's a couple of discussions away. But you need to understand that Jesus made a complete and uncompromising distinction between God and everything else. Everything else being totally insignificant except for the opportunity it provided to listen to the Holy Spirit's interpretation of it instead of the world's. That's really good. We really have to listen to the Holy Spirit's interpretation of everything here, because it's not a body, it's not its words, it's not its deeds. We're going to be seeing something else, which is the practice of forgiveness. We're going to look beyond what the body does and what the words that come out of the body's mouth, and we're just purely going to be seeing the glorious, innocent, guiltless Christ there, the love of God, the immortal spirit, all of it. It's all, we're going to be starting to bring our mind to oneness through this practice. So anything involving perception and change would, by its very nature, be imperfect, an idea Plato expressed but did not fully develop in terms of God. Jesus learned to overlook perception and choose with a perfect love of spirit on a consistent basis. Okay, so this is, and we can do this. Jesus tells us we're exactly like him. He's saying, this is what I did. This is how you do it. I encourage you to do this. Please look beyond your perception. Perception is what you think you're seeing, how you're perceiving it. So what happens is we all look at the same thing, but we're all it's like an interpretation of what we're seeing. The vital distinctions between perfect spirit and the world of change allowed him to hear the voice of the Holy Spirit more and more, which in turn allowed a process to unfold where he could forgive more and more. The voice for truth got louder and stronger until Jesus got to the point where he could listen to just this one voice and see right through everything else. Finally, Jesus became, or better, he re-became what this voice represents, his and our true reality as spirit and oneness with the kingdom of heaven. Remember, if you believe God has anything to do with the universe of perception and change, or if you believe that the mind that made this world has anything to do with God, you will sabotage the process of mastering the ability to listen only to the Holy Spirit's voice. So this is another point. We really have to come to the realization that this whole world has nothing to do with God, the world of suffering and change. God is changeless and eternal, and nothing here in this perceived world is eternal. The form always changes. Why? One reason has to do with your unconscious guilt, which is something we'll eventually have to deal with. Another is that a prerequisite of gaining the power and peace of the kingdom is to give up your own pseudo-power and your own rather precarious kingdom. How can you give up your miscreations if you believe they are God's will? And how can you relinquish your weakness if you believe it is strength? You've got to be willing to surrender the idea of authorship to God if you want to be able to share in your real power. Humility is the way. Not a false humility that says you are inadequate, but a real humility that says God is your only source. you will realize this. You will realize that except for his love, you need nothing. And he who needs nothing can be trusted with everything. So when Jesus made statements like, "Of myself I can do nothing," and "I and the Father are one," he wasn't claiming any kind of specialness for himself. In fact, he was giving up any specialness, individuality, or authorship, and accepting his true strength, the power of God. As far as Jesus was concerned, there was no Jesus, and eventually there wasn't. I'm just going to turn my little heater off here. Where did I get to? As far as Jesus was concerned, there was no Jesus. So we're talking about like a separate entity, a separate individual personality called Jesus. That's what he's referring to here. His reality was now that of pure spirit and outside of the illusion completely. This reality is also completely outside of the mind that made the false universe, a mind that people mistake for the home of their true oneness. Jesus knew that the miscreation of the universe didn't have anything to do with the truth. His identity was with God and nothing else. The peace of God, which passeth understanding, was no longer something to be strived for. It was his for the asking, or better yet, it was his for the remembering. He no longer had to seek after perfect love, for with his many wise choices, he had removed all of the barriers that had divided him from the reality of his perfection. His love, like God's, was total, impersonal, non-selective, and all-embracing. He treated everyone equally, from rabbi to prostitute. He was not a body. He was no longer a human being. He had passed through the eye of the needle. He had reclaimed his place with God as pure spirit. This is pure non-dualism, an attitude that, along with the Holy Spirit, will lead you to what you are. You and Jesus are the same thing. We all are. There is nothing else, but you need more training and practice to experience this. So Gary says, I've been taught that I'm a co-creator with God. Is that true? And Artern says, not on this level. The only place where you are really a co-creator with God is in heaven, where you would not be aware of being any different from him or in any way separate from him. So then how could you not be co-creator with him? But there is a way here on earth to practice the thought system of the Holy Spirit like Jesus did, which reflects the laws of heaven, and that is your way home. We will further discuss the attributes of pure non-dualism and how to practice it as we proceed. But for now, just try to remember that if God is perfect love and He is not anything else, then neither are you. You are, in fact, the love of God, and your real life is with Him. Like Jesus, you will come to know and experience that God is not outside of you. You will no longer identify yourself with a vulnerable body or anything else that can be limited. And a body is anything that has borders or limits. You will learn instead of your true reality as pure spirit that is invulnerable forever. So I've just got a little thing in my book that I'll stop here. Some of the things in Gary's books, I'm getting to the stage where I've read them so often that I'm just trying to maybe not go in so much to the general discussions that Gary has with Artern and Pursah about different things, just to really highlight the teachings that Artern and Pursah bring through. When you first read the book, I think it's important to read the whole book because the discussions are really good, because especially they clarify a lot of things about I can't even put into words the things they clarify. It's so amazing. But we have to remember that we're going to be, our minds are going to be undone, and we're going to unlearn a lot of things. So they go into a lot of things that, like if you were to come to a Disappearance of the Universe from any religion or with any particular ideas, they go into a lot of things, and I think they've covered so many different things that people could think or have beliefs or concepts about. So you won't find you're connecting to everything that they're bringing up, but you will find that the things that you're holding in your mind as curious, and maybe you've brought up with a religious background or not, you'll find something here. So he talks a lot about all the different religions and Christianity, and goes back a lot into Jesus's day. But what we have to also remember is that Jesus was a figure in the dream that woke up, and that his mind awoke. He was in the dream with us, but he woke up, and so he's leading us out of the dream. So I wanted to share that, and I've shared it, and I've got a bit more time. So I thought I was just asking for some guidance then on what to do, and it felt like to find something else in the book and maybe start reading about that. So I'm going to start reading I've just been directed to this area called The Secrets of Existence. So this is on page 121 if you are listening to this and you want to look at what I'm reading from as I go through it. And a little bit further down the page. People have always pondered the nature and origin of their existence. Many have assumed they found the answers and have formed countless philosophies. Yet only one man, who is no longer a man, has been able to truly explain your origin. Now, of course, I do not say this to put Nietzsche, who will find himself in God just as surely as everyone else. I say it in order to emphasize the following words from A Course in Miracles. Now, this is a quote from the Course, and it's a really amazing quote. There is no statement the world is more afraid to hear than this. I do not know the thing I am, and therefore do not know what I am doing, where I am, or how to look upon the world or on myself. Yet in this learning is salvation born, and what you are will teach you of itself. So I'll read on later, but for now I just like to talk a little bit about that statement. So it says that statement is something that will scare us, because what we're really trying to do is unlearn and undo every single thing that we think about ourselves or know about the world. And that's why what I've just read earlier on was these are long roads in themselves, each stepping stone of going from duality to pure non-duality. They're long roads in themselves. So some minds get there a little bit quicker, but there's no rush. If you have been studying the course for 20 years and you feel that you're not any further down the track, don't worry, you are. I can guarantee it. You would be. I guess what I've always encouraged others to do is just look back to where they were 5 years ago or 6 months ago and just see if there's even been a slight change in your level of peace and happiness and joy, or even the change that the painful thoughts, the suffering of the thoughts, it doesn't stay around as long, so the forgiveness is shifting them quicker. So I was working with a friend last week. She came over to my house for a few hours, and even though part of the we were doing some Bar and Cate work, but we talked a lot about forgiveness and the course's details, and she gets very sick in the stomach. She feels like she wants to throw up when we start getting to a particular part of her wanting to release, so she's tightly held on to this thing, and it's so hard to release. And as we go to it through the process, she gets extremely tired and very sick. But she said to me the next day, Cate, it wasn't as powerful. The sickness and the tired wasn't as powerful, and it didn't last as long. So that's really it. She was still getting very agitated and upset, and she could feel her whole body reflecting this, not wanting to lose this complete closed-minded belief about something that happened to her. And so if you read I've done a YouTube clip, and I've gone through that just the essay part, what is forgiveness? It's after lesson 220. And one of the paragraphs is about how the mind is completely held. It's so tight, and it doesn't raise anything to doubt. There's no shaft of light. So when I work with people, it's really just to put a tiny gap, just the tiniest crack in the mind of what's tightly held. And there's that beautiful song, or poem or something about the light can get in when there's a crack. So all we have to do is just put a tiny, tiny crack in that belief or that concept or that tightly held upsetting thought that is constantly going round and round and round in our minds. The ego mind is just this loop of unworthiness, of they did this to me, that was wrong, I should have changed it, I should have done something so the outcome would have been different. It's all this past stuff that goes round and round in our minds. And what we're asked to do is raise it to doubt. And there's some reason why to raise that to doubt would absolutely shatter everything that we've believed for 50 years and blamed and pointed our finger, and that is such a difficult thing to undo. It can seem a difficult thing to undo because we've got a hierarchy that some things are harder to forgive than others. But Jesus is asking us to look with him, to go with him. The Holy Spirit saying, hey, I can help you. And that's why constant prayer, help me see this differently. Above all else, I want to see this differently, because we have to see that if we desire to hold on to that belief and that thought as true, that we suffer. We really do. We're in suffering. And that's where that I want another way comes from. You know, we start to realise how much we're suffering. So getting back to this no statement the world is more afraid of, I do not know the thing I am. So this is actually, this statement here is the transforming. So it's going back from the ego to what we talked about in non-dualism just before. We're going back to God's mind of love. We're going to be fully self-realized in God, where our mind is going to fully join back into this love of God, and that is heaven. That is literally it's a most gorgeous state of mind. And even though we're still going to be seeing the world with our eyes, we're not going to be actually in perception of the world of separation. We're going to be in a different perception. Our sight's still seeing things and our ears are still hearing things, but they're not reporting back the same message. We're going to just see the beautiful love of God everywhere. We're going to see everything as joined and as one. So everything's going to be the same. The love of God, the beauty, the magnificence, the beloved, whatever word you want to put on it, you're just going to love it as it is. Every single person will be seen as the same. They're not going to be, we won't have any idea. Your mind will not actually interpret any differences. Your mind is going to be seeing the world as God sees the world, and God sees the world as purely his holy child, his holiness. He knows who we are. He knows we are this perfect, magnificent, eternal, changeless love of God that's infinite. And that's where we get to. That's what your mind can live in that. And this is where we want to get to. We don't want to be stuck in a mind that is pure suffering. You know, there's no need to. And awakening now seems to be happening very quickly. There seems to be a quickening. It was Mother's Day this weekend in Australia, and I was taken out on, it's Sunday morning is usually, or Sunday is Mother's Day, but I was taken out by my son and my daughter and their partners and my grandchildren and my husband Kevin. We all went out for a lovely brunch. And my daughter and her partner are awakened, and my son left after an hour or so with my grandchildren. And my daughter and my they're not married, but they're just so gorgeous. They are on a spiritual path and they're just amazing. So they woke up so fast. It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. If you think your awakened mind's not going to affect anyone around you, I am absolutely astounded by the effects of this mind that I'm living in. So I awakened, and then I was not even realising how effective I was to my daughter and her boyfriend at the time, the same guy here. And I went through a period of time where I spent time with my daughter, and I was practicing this course. I was purely seeing her as this innocent love of God, the pure Christ, and that was my first miracle. Was that I saw her differently. She was the first person I'd ever practiced this with, this practicing of seeing the innocence and the guiltlessness beyond whatever the body was doing. And she was having a very difficult time of her life at that stage. She was very abusive to me, very lost, seemingly lost. And so I just practiced what the Course asked me to do. And I just saw this massive change. And not even really understanding how this worked, I started to see how it works, how she was affected. And then her boyfriend came to me he had a situation, and I joined with him one night, and we joined in our minds, and my daughter and him and myself, we all joined with Jesus. And we joined in this intense visualization with him. And it was very spontaneous. She just called me out of the blue and just said, "Can you do this? There's a lot of stuff happening with him and her at this stage." There was a lot of fear. There was just egoic, you could say. And we joined on the level of mind, and she said, "You do this thing called A Course in Miracles. We need a miracle." And I said, "Well, the miracle is the mind, the shift of the mind." So she was open at that time for something different. So we joined, and this was about 6 months after the first time that I'd been practicing seeing her as the Christ rather than a child that needed to be fixed and helped and changed. So we joined in that, and it was just beautiful. I was feeling Jesus, and he was getting me to say things to her partner at that particular time. And he had this massive healing, and I just thought that was it, you know. He just had a real miracle that night. And then all of a sudden, within the next 3 months, both of them were completely dedicated to awakening. And they got on their own spiritual path, and they awoke very, very quickly. I was astounded. I think probably 6 months to a year. Very, very fast. And we all had a level of complete commitment to awakening, to undoing the fifth thought system in our minds. So my daughter is now I think I've shared before, she's been called the little Buddha. So when I sit with her, and we had breakfast on Mother's Day, I literally was just crying the whole time. I'm just so amazed at the power of this healing mind, the power that comes through us, and seeing her sharing how her awakened her mind is, and how clear she is, and how dedicated she is, and all the mind she's affecting. And I think, wow, this all came about from me just deciding in that moment to practice what Jesus was telling me to do in the Course. And he's got his own business. He meets a lot of people, and this is my daughter's boyfriend. He just says, he calls me Mum. He says, Mum, it's all about the love. And he just throws his hands up and he just says, whenever I talk to people, I just say it's all about love and I love you. And he's just so open and so loving. And he just says, I just tell everyone I love them. It's all about being this love. Love heals. And it's so gorgeous to have a daughter and a partner so amazingly open. And she shared this particular thing that she tells her girlfriends and whoever she comes in contact with. And it's a particular process that I was doing as well. Through the Holy Spirit guided me, and we were just laughing. We're like, I've never seen this in a book. It's probably in the books, but we both came up with it and we're laughing. And I've got 4 minutes, I'll quickly share what that is. And it's nothing new, but it was just amazing to hear her share it in her own words. And she says whenever she gets any fear, she looks immediately at what is the worst thing that can happen. What is my mind saying is the worst thing that can happen from this fear? And then she said, then I go there and then I say, what were her words? I loved her words, how she said this. She said, can I be at peace with this? And I said to her, you know that it'll always be death and suffering of the body. That's what the ego holds out. And she said, oh yes, I know that. And she said, I've had to face death. She said, I've faced screaming demons in my mind. She said, I face this. She said, I'm facing everything. I know I watched a little series about Buddha and the way they just did the Buddha awakening where he was sitting under the Buddha tree and all the seemingly demons come roaring at him, and I was getting that picture as she said that. My journey was a little bit different, but it doesn't matter. It's all the same. All the fears that your mind's going to come up with, the ego's going to pull out the big guns about awakening. The sacrifices and the losses. So it was amazing. So she says to her friends, hey, if you're scared of leaving your partner, what's the worst thing that can happen? You must bring up in your mind what your mind is telling you about the worst thing, and then go to that and then say, can I be at peace with this? So I'm not giving you my teaching today, which is very similar to that. I'm going to give you my daughter's teaching. So I never thought I'd be here 5 years later giving my daughter's teaching. So I'm finishing up now. It's on the hour. So I'll just say I love you, I bless you, and I honour you. And thank you for joining in. And I'm so grateful that you're listening in and you have dedicated your mind, yourself to awakening to the love. So